Hello, and welcome to the Castle Cast, the podcast where we talk about all things Frank Castle, aka our favorite antihero, the Punisher. In this week's episode, we'll be discussing the cultural significance of the first season of the Marvel and Netflix show, The Punisher. To give a brief summary of this antihero, Frank Castle's Punisher persona is created after the murder of his wife and 2 children. After this, Castle becomes a one-man army on a mission to kill criminals in hopes that others aren't put through the pain of his own loss, as well as to avenge his family and kill all those responsible for their deaths. The Punisher is culturally significant because of its critical look at traditional narrative ideals, as well as the justice system as a whole, and how miscarried justice affects our ideas of right and wrong. We'll be going through 3 key points to help you recognize the Punisher's cultural significance when it comes to anti-hero texts. First, we'll look at how and why we enjoy anti-hero texts differently than the traditional hero-villain narratives. Then, we'll look at how anti-hero texts are a reflective look at the idea of good and bad, and how those distinctions can become grayed. Lastly, we'll discuss how anti-hero texts provide a critical discourse of the justice system, as many anti-heroes, including Frank Castle, feel the need to get their own justice as he feels the legal and bureaucratic system impede his battle for justice. Let's begin by defining what an anti-hero is. Author Ricky Schubert describes the anti-hero as: between heroes and villains is the anti-hero, a complex character who is an amalgam of, on the one hand, desirable character traits and, on the other hand, objectionable behavior. Schubert uses cognitive film scholar Marguerite Bernvage's idea to understand the ways in which we enjoy anti-hero texts, saying she theorizes that the audience first experiences what she calls fictional relief. She says that fictional relief is our understanding that the text is not real, and therefore our moral judgment is different than if it were non-fiction. For example, Frank Castle murders hundreds of people throughout the season, but we just see those people as bad guys, people who have killed or hurt other people, and we can therefore understand and justify why Castle chooses to kill those individuals. But we don't think about these people's families and the idea that those he has killed are, in some ways, victims of murder themselves. They were not tried and sentenced, and they were not innocent until proven guilty. If the audience saw a news story about a mass of mob members found dead, I believe they would take pause and not cheer on their death like it is sometimes customary to do after Castle has killed his targets in the show. Vaj also says the audience usually experiences what she calls a reality check. This is when we realize the moral ambiguity of caring and sympathizing for this person, an anti-hero and a killer. We are shocked back into reality at some points, finally understanding the violence and morally off-putting nature of an anti-hero. For the Punisher's example, many of Castle's victims cry and beg for mercy, for the Punisher to spare their life, but Castle is unrelenting, and if he sees he is guilty, there will be no mercy.
Oh, please, just let me go, man. Take the money. Take the money, man. You don't have to kill me over this. It was him or us! Oh, God!
To move forward, anti-heroes like the Punisher showed in this season represent a morally gray version of our idea of good and bad. Castle kills bad people, which ensures that they are unable to hurt anyone else, but he also brutally and unmercifully kills them without fully understanding their situation or allowing them to be punished legally by the justice system. Authors Daniel Schaefer and Arthur Rainey use affective disposition theory, or ADT, to understand our enjoyment of traditional hero and villain narratives, and therefore our understanding of good and bad, and contrast this theory to our enjoyment of anti-hero texts. Schaefer and Rainey describe ADT as the idea in which we like heroes and don't like villains based on their moral character. The authors say moral judgment regulates each of these emotional reactions, and is therefore central to our enjoyment of the show. But anti-hero narratives call this into question and makes us rethink our idea of right and wrong. Considering ADT suggests that we enjoy stories more when the protagonist has unwaveringly good morals, anti-heroes are conflicting for this theory, says Schaefer and Rainey. The authors found that the more sympathetic the audience was to the character, the more positive feelings they had for the show. For example, I found myself cheering for Frank Castle when he killed some of the main villains of the show, like Agent Orange. He also maims and disfigures his ex-best friend, Billy Russo. These 2 men were instrumental in the killing of Castle's family, especially in terms of the betrayal Castle felt when he discovered that Russo had gone along with and participated in the slaying of his wife and children. Considering he loved Russo so much, he considered him a brother, and his children called him Uncle Bill.
Kill me. Do it! I'm not gonna let you die today. Dying's easy. You gotta learn about pain. You gotta learn about loss. I look for him, Bill. I look for him. But then I remember, it's gotta be the same for you. You remember what you did. You remember, Bill. You're gonna remember me. No!
So again, the morality of his actions are great, considering you can understand and sympathize with his need to get revenge, and we can therefore justify his actions, which calls into question our idea of right and wrong. Finally, I'll discuss how anti-hero media provides us with a critical examination of the justice system and its failings, as many anti-heroes, Frank Castle included, feel it necessary to get their own justice since the governmental systems in place fail or create obstacles for anti-heroes to get justice in a normal manner. Author Kent Worcester says, the anti-hero character represents the frustrations of millions of people who feel powerless and who fantasize about striking back at their enemies, be they real or imagined. Worcester goes on to look specifically at the Punisher in terms of retributive justice. He says that the Punisher looks at the audience's anger of miscarried justice that fails because of due processes. Along with the anger and frustration Castle has for the justice system, his partner for the season, David Lieberman, aka Micro, is forced into feeling the same hate. While Micro is much less likely to murder anyone, he does aid Castle in his fight against the special ops group Project Cerberus, who is trying to cover up major misconduct, including the killing of Castle's family. Micro uses his computer skills to help Castle hunt down the corrupt members of Project Cerberus in order to keep him and his wife and children safe. As Micro is an average man with no military training or violent tendencies, unlike Castle, you can really understand his desperation. He knows that, since it's the justice system who is trying to kill him, he will not get proper or normal justice and therefore needs to ensure his own.
But you and me, we want the same thing right now. So work with me.
One condition.
Yeah, name it.
They die. Every single one of them, no trials. No bullshit. They die.
Yeah, I can live with that.
To conclude, Worcester says that vengeance stories, one where the main character suffers an injustice in which they feel they need to try and make right, is usually for that of an anti-hero. Worcester says it is the job of an anti-hero to go forward on a journey, one where it will not end in happiness, only a continuance of slight satisfaction when another criminal is off the street, and one where we get secondhand enjoyment by some form of justice being served. As you can see, the first season of Marvel's The Punisher helps us to distinguish the different gray areas between hero and villain, and right and wrong, as well as why an audience enjoys watching justice served outside of the law. In my opinion, The Punisher is the best example of an anti-hero, one where you go back and forth, struggling to justify the character's actions, but in the end, understand his motives and sympathize with his pain. And with that, I want to thank you for listening to the Castlecast. Come back next week where we discuss our favorite episode of the first season.